everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is Barr. FBI lawyer guilty plea signals the breaking of the dam. Subtitle, flow like a river, right? So, we're still going to hold off on addressing the surface level political stuff for another video with Kamala Harris and the DNC convention and whatnot. But for right now, the big aspect of the news right now and this whole just narrative that's been spun since the last election, right? Since before the last election, is this whole Russiagate thing and this whole mania, this whole frothing, schizophrenic, just state of madness that people have been thrown into as a result of their adherence and belief in the media, and, you know, adherence to those narratives and assuming that on some level they are correct. You know, the very brainwashed people think that, you know, everything the New York Times writes or what CNN reports is the truth, right? It's not biased, it's just reporting the facts, sir. And then, you know, the people who are at least a little bit more moderate, you know, they've been around long enough to see that, you know, they don't always get the story straight, and oftentimes they get it, you know, very much not straight, and then they, you know, there's even corrections issued, but the correction never reaches as far as the false story, right? And so it's kind of like the damage is done, right? The lie moves around the world 10 times by the time the truth is just putting on its shoelaces. And so, yeah, basically, Kevin Kleinsmith is the FBI lawyer who has now pled guilty in the as the first indictment to come out of the Durham probe. What's his first name? John Durham, I believe. Is the FBI prosecutor who, you know, there was Michael Horowitz that came out last year and pretty much, at least in informational form, obliterated the entire, you know, Mueller investigation, the whole Russiagate narrative, and we've already been through this so many times, but what's different now is that actual criminal, convictions are being handed down, indictments, and now basically we have our first guilty plea. And not like a guilty plea from Michael Flynn, which was entirely, you know, procedural and concocted for the sake of political targeting. What Kevin Kleinsmith did as an FBI lawyer is literally, it's about as bad as I could possibly imagine for someone who is a lawyer, someone who is part of the bar, right? And that's kind of the moniker for today, because bar has many meanings, doesn't it, right? Bar is the organization that lawyers join. There's state bars and there's, you know, federal bars, and depending on which level of representation you're engaging on. And, you know, we are Attorney General. His name is William Barr, right? You know, bars are what people get thrown behind when, you know, they get convicted by the members of the bar and the judges and, you know, a court of their peers or whatnot. Or in the court of public opinion, just, you know, somebody said something and so the Twitter mob goes after you, right? But, and then you get shadow banned, you get thrown behind digital bars. But, you know, it basically, the word implies a restriction. It implies a divider, a division, and, you know, a solid substance to serve as a division, right? The bar of metal, right? And so what basically Kevin Kleinsmith did is he completely inverted a document that was sent by the CIA to the FBI, right? The whole premise of the FISA applications that started all this Russiagate nonsense was basically them surveilling Carter Page and basically the Steele dossier, and basically the implication that was completely fallacious that Carter Page was a Russian agent, when in fact, you know, he was a CIA agent and he was working in Russia for the CIA. And so basically the FBI asked in, what was it, August of 2016, before any, you know, FISA applications were approved, or any of this whole thing had really gotten started, because they were still assuming that Hillary Clinton would win. That was basically, you know, the plan. And so the insurance policy that Strzok and Comey and McCabe were talking about is basically the Russiagate investigation, this whole hoax to try and neuter and, you know, basically tie up the Trump presidency behind a whole bunch of legalese rigmarole. And they would use their courts to issue, stays and injunctions on every, action that he would try to take that would actually be effective. But throughout, Trump has illustrated that he knows the game that they're playing. He is very alert and awake to it. And so he's found ways around it, right? With building the wall, he used funds from the military, right? And many of these things have been contested in the courts. And as a result of all the judicial appointments, which we talked about a lot in the last video, the tide is now finally turning. It doesn't matter what you vote for as a referendum. It doesn't matter what politicians you get into place. If you still don't have the courts, then they will basically strike it down. These commie judges will strike down anything resembling freedom. And so all of your efforts will be neutered by the courts. So it's absolutely essential that be the focus of the just action, is making the law back in alignment with God, with objective reality, and not the false laws of man. Just to bring it back for a second, cannabis, for example, prohibition is a law of man. It is not the law of God. And nothing in the Bible can be legitimately construed to suggest that the creations of God should be restricted in the terms of the plants and their access to the human race. But anyway, it is basically a very, very good transition that we are witnessing. And again, there's a deliberate effort to black pill people and to keep them neutered, again, by taking away their morality and their morale in general, their attitude. Again, what defines the victory in the battlefield? It is, the weapons and the soldiers and, all the participants in various ways, but it is also the morale. A small group with strong morale can overcome a large group with poor morale. And, when you have a large group with good morale and you have a population united in a spirit of that objective truth and that divine, spark that, again, we're different people of different races, but we are all human. And again, even the people that I'm aware of that are definitely more ethnocentric and want to be around their own people, I mean, it's only the neocons that want to go out and bomb, people just because it's convenient for them, right? And again, this is the same type of tribe that Mr. Kleinsmith from, and Mr. Weissman, who is basically the true head of the Mueller investigation, with Andrew Weissman, and then we have Rod Rosenstein, of course. It's like, maybe, we should think about diversity in our hiring processes a little bit more. Make sure that, all of our lawyers at, the federal police agency, essentially what the FBI is, are all from essentially a small tribe constituting 2% of the U.S. population, without getting into any sort of prejudicial, aspects and indicting a whole group of people. I think it's just interesting, again, when there's just a very specific hiring practice when it comes to certain fields. When it comes to high medical positions, high legal positions, it's almost like people are kind of like have their little club, and they just kind of recruit from in their club. And then as long, it's like, and again, it's like skull and bones, right? When your own, like John Kerry and George Bush back in 2004, they were from the same fraternity, right? They're running in different parties, but they're from the same frat. And it's like, this isn't like Sigma Chi or something, or some, college, beer pong fraternity. This is basically a fraternity where you have to pledge essentially your life and your honor, and that you will basically be loyal to the Skull and Bones Club, the fraternity, above all else, right? Higher than national loyalty, higher than family loyalty, higher than anything. And so this is kind of, when people say, oh, you believe in that conspiracy stuff, it's like people who mock and ridicule conspiracies and conspiracy theories either are deliberately deceptive because they have a social imperative to be deliberately deceptive in that regard, or they're just genuinely morons and have, cauterized that part of their brain that sees things and only sees what other people tell them, right? And using that, again, returning to the story, is so the CIA responded to the FBI when they asked, is Carter Page a CIA asset? Does he work for you guys? And their email basically said, yes, he works for us. And so what Kevin Kleinsmith did is added in the word not, so that they changed the document so that it basically read that the CIA responded, no, Carter Page does not work for us. He fully inverted 180 degrees the meaning of a document from the CIA. And they had this before any of the FISA warrants were approved. And so this is really and Weissman is out here trying to say that is immaterial change, and that he tried to basically weasel his way around it and say, don't believe your lying eyes. This is just a normal procedure, and Trumpity Trump, you know. But it's, again, people. There's only so far that goes with even the average person of mediocre intelligence. Yes, you've got your brainwashed commies. Again, you know, the grip on them is stronger than it ever has been. Although with Biden, it's funny because they realize that the Democrats don't give a shit about them either. It's all just basically one deceptive marketing plan, one just, you know, skeezy, weaselly, just scheme. It's the schemers and their schemes. And it has no legitimacy whatsoever. And people like, you know, a good liberal friend of mine basically said, you know, I'll give Trump one thing, you know, he's got a great marketing team, a great marketing campaign. And I was like, yeah, well, you know, it's called genuine enthusiasm. And he's like, no, well, it's a marketing campaign. I was like, yes, but what is a marketing campaign? The great marketing artists, right, the gurus of the industry, they know that there are these subconscious and conscious human drives. And so you want your brand to align with those natural ingrained human drives so that people don't think of a product, they think of an experience, they think of an identity. And they think of, you know, on like a limbic level, not like a surface sort of level. It's a feeling and a reaction, you know, just like how they say smell is the strongest, you know, sense associated with memory. Like you smell something, it's like, wow, I smelled that back when I was 7 years old and we were barbecuing in the forest, you know. It's memory. Memory is very interesting, is very core aspect of the human race. And in brainwashing the human race, you know, all these little clubs have basically sought to, again, neuter and anesthetize. That's the word of the day, neuter, right? Because when you look at somebody like Kevin Kleinsmith or like Brian Stelter, right? That's kind of what they look like. They look like neutered individuals. They look like eunuchs. They're just, you know, functionaries of their ideology and don't have any connection to organic, you know, strength and power and connection. And so, you know, again, all the false religions are seeking to sap that from people and get them to drain their energy rather than cultivate it. And again, they try and make that out to be some pagan, you know, satanic, you know, philosophy. But in truth, it is the original Christianity, the Irish Christianity, the Druidic Christianity that did not disconnect people from nature and from creation in order to better know what they conceive to be the creator. Right? Again, how best to know an artist but to study their work. And that's how I think of, you know, all the plants and the animals and the natural structure, chemistry and biology. Study the creator's work and you will know his mind. You know, or her mind for those of you out there. But, you know, it's androgyne at a certain point. But the androgyne is still of a masculine demeanor because it's just as in a husband and wife, you know, the husband speaks to the outside world and the wife speaks to the inside world. And it's not like that's exclusive, but in terms of proper functions, as Jesse Lee Peterson, you know, helped me realize there's a natural order, right? God in Christ, Christ in man, or God over Christ, Christ over man, man over woman, women over children. And I would add in there children over the earth, that it is for the children and it is for the future and for that, negentropic field of that increase in coherence. As entropy dissipates, negentropy can coagulate, and meaning and information and evolution as we know it is contained within that field. And that is how everything is able to communicate with everything else. And all this universe is not just a bunch of relativistic particles bumping around and exploding, but everything is moving together in a coherent field. It is all spinning and spiraling together, my brothers. And it's a beautiful thing. And so when we meditate on the structure of the universe, we have memory. We have memory of our own self. We have memory of our family. We have memory of our ancestral family. And we have memory of this society and the evolution of these structures that we have created, you know, and others have created for us at certain points. But they want us to think that they can just literally edit reality and change like a light switch, flip a switch, and we're just going to accept it. And again, for the people who sip on CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, they do eat that bag of shit, right? And they this is yummy, this is great, this is such good writing and such good journalism. It's a bag of shit, right? I'm not necessarily willing to say that it was always a bag of shit, but it certainly is today. And it's more brazen and blatant than it has ever been before. And so it is about time for those who were a part of the bar, of the lawyer sort, to be thrown behind bars. And, if we don't get that sort of conclusion and transpiring of events very soon, I would say that the only inevitable reaction is, the metal kind of bars being used in a very real vigilante sort of thing. Again, disavow, not recommending anything, but I'm saying that when you see people out in the street already beating people up and kicking them in the face because of their political ideology, I mean, again, say what you will about the black nationalists, but they're very hip to, the devious scheming of the tribe of Kleinsmith, if you will, and that high-level sort of criminal clique that has ruled with impunity since, our boy Kennedy was shot in the head in Dallas, back in November of 1963. And so Trump has been a very real bucking of that parasitic authority. And from the very beginning, I know Trump has been a Zionist, but he's been his daughter married Jared Kushner, right? His grandchildren are Jewish. But again, Trump knows the difference between true ethic of God, the true Jews, who, basically no one of any good faith should have a problem with, and basically the false sort of communist cube of Saturn type, dark aspect that is going on, behind the scenes, and by people who claim to be of all different faiths, right? People who claim to be Christian, people who claim to be, Buddhist, all these, wolves in sheep's clothing, right? But, just why Jesus said, you must be wise as serpents. You have to have the mind of a predator, you have to have almost a reptilian mind activated in your own self, right? Be wise as a serpent, but to know that there is, a greater connection and a higher spirit. The human frame encompasses all of the different animal frames. And, people, the media in big way, it gets people like almost associated with an animal, and they think of themselves as an animal. And as a result of that, they actually restrict their human potential. They cease to be a man in the omniform, and they start to be just one archetype on an animalistic level, and thus their energy never rises to that higher level of union with the Creator, which is where all the true geniuses that we have known we're operating from, right? Any that you could name, Nikola Tesla, right? Leonardo da Vinci, Plotinus, right? Pythagoras, Plato, Socrates. All these were operating in a true human frame of understanding that, through conception, through logic and observation, that we can actually know things that are far beyond our immediate physical capacity. And so, we will see what happens with the FBI. It's my opinion that the entire agency should be abolished. I think it's been a nightmare from the time it was started. I don't necessarily agree that there is a need for a federal police force, as long as we have honest, ethical, and accountable, constituent state forces, and give them the operating latitude to, make their own calls inside of their territory. Maybe there's a rule for a restricted FBI or reformed FBI, but, I'm of a very low opinion of the entire agency at this point, but we'll see. Maybe they'll go and completely redeem themselves. But I think it's very good to see the guilty plea from Kleinsmith. I think that Weissman's weasel words are very indicative of the panic and the just total incoherence of these people. The fact that the media has not reported it basically at all, like the typical fake news did not report on it even for a single second, and I think like 2 of the other networks ran it for like 20 seconds, just bare mention. But it is very much a bellwether, right? The bell is ringing, and can you hear it? Because there's more to come, and this dam is breaking, and I say let it flow like a river. And again, people can be pessimistic, but again, for all the quibbles of the QAnon folk, I still absolutely love the narrative and the adherence to hope and commitments to overturning this structure, right? It's better to be a QAnon person than it is to be just a black pill. Because if you are demoralized, you're completing and reinforcing what they have sought to do to you, which is to demoralize you. The greatest revolution and rebellion you can have against the cabal is simply to retain your moralization, your morale, and your morals and your morale, your attitude and your virtue. Maintain that and keep going stronger, and understand that these changes are inevitable. They are not impossible. Maybe they were impossible back in Fifth World when, the cabal was basically at the top of the pyramid. But the top of the pyramid's been lopped off, and, everything's been flipped on its head in one way or another. And so what was impossible before is now inevitable. And as long as we have that attitude, it will come to pass. Because again, when they understand that it's either indictments or, when it's either disbarments from the bar or it's bars of metal in the street, then they have to make a decision. And they know that it's better to basically sacrifice the obviously guilty and the exposed to try and, live to fight another day and save some of their more valuable pieces, if you will. But I think as long as we continue to expand, evolve, and push outward in alignment with the field of God, then more things that were impossible will become inevitable. And so that is exactly where I try and keep my mind amidst all this chaos when, 5-year-olds are, getting basically shot and the media doesn't report on it because it's a black man. It's a very scary time in many ways. So we have to retain our morale. We have to keep that spirit because it is essential to victory in any of the successful timelines. So anyway, that's my video today. Look into the happenings of Kleinsmith and see how ridiculous this whole thing is. Right? Don't believe your lying eyes. The FBI knows the truth and will tell you what it is. I want to see James Comey go behind bars. I want to see McCabe behind bars. I want to see basically all of the FBI leadership during that time essentially get sacked. And, if there's any role for an FBI going forward, it needs to be significantly reformed in some way, because the FISA application process is obviously corrupt to the bone if they could get these through. And that was just accepted as legitimate evidence. And to this day, all these brainwashed liberals think that it was legitimate, but it was complete whole cloth fake narrative, fake news from the very beginning, from peeing on Russian prostitutes, to all the rest. And, God bless those people who still believe in it, but I have no use for them at any point in this new world. So, yeah, that's my video today. Much love to you guys, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.